Happy Tuesday. What's up? What's up, Connie? I'm telling you, you should be like doing, that sounds very like Asian themed music right there.
Yeah.
I think you should totally get one of those, like what are they? Are they like harpsichords? What are they? The big long.
Mandolin.
Is it called a mandolin? It's super long.
I don't know. I just know the word from the.
Or a sitar. Can you get a sitar?
No, I have a. What is it? I have an Ezraj, which is like
what?
weird. It's like a weird sitar.
You might want to go see a doctor for that.
No, it's like a sitar, but it's played with a bow, and it's weird. I don't know how to play it.
Did you ever watch Kung Fu Hustle?
Yeah.
And they had the long thing, and then they shoot it. Is that Kung Fu Hustle?
Yeah.
Is that the one where the musicians come and they're like assassins, and they like start their own thing? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Liquid Swords. I thought of like the Wu-Tang there. Oh my God. So do you want to talk about, which one do you want to talk about? Your childhood dream, or releasing your fear of dealing with the fear of death?
You seem to not want to talk about.
You can talk about that. Go ahead. Go ahead. Start get us going. What is your topic for discussion today?
Well, one thing I've been rereading the Book of the Samurai by Yamamoto Tsunetomo.
You've spoken like a true native there. Sumitomo? Tsunetomo?
And then it's the Hagakure.
Hadakade?
Hagakure. And
it's not bad, Mike, because I can't even jump up in the air.
It's too bad.
It's bad. It's bad.
One of the main ideas of the Book of the Samurai is that, like, in order to be a samurai, one of the main tenets is to like meditate about death and dying every day. And
I thought the whole point was not to care about dying or death.
I think the idea is to accept death, and so that the part of you that actively tries to prevent death doesn't take over the main executive functioning part of your brain.
The quest for survival?
Yeah.
Right?
Like the whole idea of the samurai is that like you as an individual are dead. Your individual needs and desires don't matter. You dedicate your life to a singular purpose.
Okay.
That would be like the will of your retainer in those times.
So basically you've been brainwashed is what that means.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're basically saying like when you think about the things that the fundamental drives of a human being, right? I would say there's kind of like two, right, that I could think of. And maybe they would actually reduce down to one or three or whatever, but there's the will to reproduce, which I think is actually secondary to the will to survive.
Yeah.
Right? Those are kind of like, when I think, I could be wrong, but when I think of just off the top of my head, the two greatest drives. So if you say to somebody, no, let me just finish the thought.
Sure.
But you take away the most kind of fundamental ego-driven thing, right? Like, I want to survive. I mean, are you at that point like a cult member? Or are you have you been brainwashed?
How much do you think in your day-to-day life does the part of your brain that is in charge of keeping you alive, how much does that actually keep you alive? Because I think the assertion here is that people use it way too much. Like,
well, there's the conscious part of it, and then there's the unconscious
the part that is in charge of keeping you alive for survival's sake. That's the part that's in charge of like anxiety, and all sorts of like fear, like all sorts of emotional responses. Like people nowadays, they get anxious about like social problems. They get anxious about just various different things that have nothing to do with survival.
I agree.
Right. So the idea is, if you can just get rid of this part of your brain and all of these parts that could cause you anxiety and things that could disrupt, I think, your overall goal. The whole idea is that like you've chosen to adopt the goal, this greater purpose, this goal of another person. So it's kind of like brainwashing, but it's like self-chosen. Like I choose.
Well, are you really? Because I thought you were born into the family clan and you're kind of assigned this role, right? Like you don't get to sign up and be like, yeah, I'm a peasant, but I want to be a samurai now.
There are a lot of different samurais. It's a long.
In general, could you generalize? Would it generally be the case that you're essentially like?
In general, you're born into this. You could choose to serve this person, or you could like kill yourself. So it's like those are your options, right?
Cake or death.
Yeah, and well, back then it's like.
And they enjoyed a pretty good status in Japanese society.
Depends on the samurai. There's a range of people.
But could you generalize? In general,
would
you rather? Well, let me ask you this: would you have rather been a samurai or rather been a peasant? In feudal Japan.
I don't know. But
come on.
So
you'd rather get a sword.
The whole idea is to like dedicate your life to this one person, and that works society-wise, right? Like if everyone kind of
it works really well for that person.
No, it works well for the group as well because you get like common rules that create this cohesion among people. There are expectations. They're expected to follow the rules. Like, it doesn't matter what you want. Like, if you don't follow the rules, you can kill yourself or you can leave. Like, those are the options. They did have Ronin. There were samurais without masters, but, like, it's not that great, you know? It's just, to have a master is to have...
How did you make your money when you were a Ronin? How did you put food on the table? How did you have a...
Freelancing, mostly. Freelancing. Or you could do robbery, but anyway. But, like, if you didn't have a master, you didn't have a way to eat, a way to live, a way to do things. You didn't have a purpose, right? Like, that was where they...
Well, your purpose then was transferred to, like, I gotta put food on my table, right? Like, I gotta go out and work somehow.
No.
Do something.
Wait, what?
Well, if for whatever reason, by choice or circumstance, I decide, or it's decided for me that I can no longer be part of this, I can no longer serve this person or family. I'm out on my own.
Yes.
Now I gotta start worrying about myself.
Yes.
Right? So it's a...
Yeah, and
whether by choice or by circumstance, now my ego is restored to me, right?
Well,
like
not just
now
that,
I have to
but
go
like
out and think about this.
You lose the protection of the group as well, right? Like, because if it's like gangs nowadays. If you assault a member of a gang, like a rival gang, you should expect to be
assaulted.
Yeah, receive retaliation.
Yes, that's
so
the whole. Yes, there's group protection.
You could call it brainwashing, but like it's no different than how society works today, right? Like people adopt ideas that aren't their own.
No,
every single person who is part of society has adopted ideas that are not their own simply because it makes society work. No child is born with the idea of manners. No child is born with any sort of ideas.
Those are like conventions, right? Like those are. This is like polite society, like how to be nice or courteous to someone. That is not like, Kevin, I will kill and die for you.
Yeah, that's
right. That's not the same. Those are not the same things. I would agree that there are groups of people who make that same decision, right? Like if you're a cult member.
It's like if you're an employee. Like if you have a boss, it's the same thing.
No, it's not.
No, you're dedicating like how much of your life for how much money? Like you're
It's not that, but I'm not. I can leave my job. I can choose my job. I have all this.
You can.
Relative freedom, but I think a lot of people have that freedom, right?
No, I think a lot of people don't.
But nobody says. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. There are people who take serious risks in their profession, right? Like a police officer or a coal miner.
The samurai, as a class, they weren't all warriors.
I'm not disputing that. What I'm trying to ask is, we're probably getting sidetracked. So we can leave it here too. It's not that important a point, but it strikes me when we talk about this, there are good things about talking about and I think you're going to get to them. About not focusing so much on all the terrible things that could happen in your life, right? Or not so terrible things in many instances. But it strikes me, especially in today's day and age, where people kind of voluntarily swear this absolute fealty and give up their autonomy for, yes, a perceived benefit. But
are we talking about jobs now? What are we talking about?
I don't think it's the same thing as a job.
I feel like it's the same thing.
But, it's one of those things where the samurai enjoy a certain kind of romanticized place, it's like gangsters. You know, they enjoy us because they have a code, and there's certain things that are attractive about them, which I agree with. But
Hopefully.
you know, it's at its core this philosophy, which I never really thought about. Like, you're right, is like an absolute forswearing of one's own personal interests in the service of another, which is a very that is a big step.
How many of your own personal interests are you solidly for certain sure are yours?
I don't understand your question.
Like, how much do you think that what you perceive to be your self-interest is truly in your self-interest?
100%.
An idea that has been asserted enough times around you that you have accepted it as truth.
100% of my perceived self-interest is actually my self-interest.
Yeah?
100%.
You say that confidently. Go ahead.
I mean, that's what else is there to say?
The rest.
What's the rest?
Why? How?
No, I want to hear more about the how do you say it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
How to something. Come to your point, because I don't want to digress into
you're saying that
my own.
Like this way of thought doesn't work because you're giving up your freedom.
I didn't say it didn't work.
How much freedom?
I didn't say it didn't work at all. Obviously, the samurai went
doesn't
on
work
for a long time.
life.
The Japanese feudal period went on for, I don't know, 1,000 years? I don't know, maybe that's over exaggeration. So obviously it worked for the Japanese for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not disputing that it doesn't work. I'm saying at its core, if that is its core, that's a pretty big leap of faith, shall we say. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would appeal. Well, maybe it would appeal to
a
lot of people. You know, like you think about in the military, right? Like you're kind of making that same leap of faith. You're not serving a person or a family at that point. You're serving democracy.
No, you're serving the president, aren't you?
Or you're serving, you know, a lot of people, what they say is like, you know, you go in fighting for freedom, you know, fighting for America. But then when you really get down into the trenches, so to speak, you're really fighting for your buddy next to you.
Yeah.
That's who you're really fighting for. You know, you're fighting for the guys that are all, you know, with it's like a gang, you know, almost like, you know, we're all here, we all depend on each other, we fight for each other. No one's like leading the charge, like, go America. It's like, okay, we're fighting for each other, right? So anyway, continue on.
So how much of your life do you think is are you solid that all of your ideas and thoughts are yours?
All of my ideas and thoughts are yours. That wasn't your original question.
No, but
I mean, do you? I mean, I didn't think of all the things, right? We obviously all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, or maybe relative height. I don't know whose shoulder you stand on, but you know, if you adopt certain ideals in your life, you know, those ideals come from somewhere, right? And you can examine them and say, is this really what I truly believe, if you will? But I mean, I didn't think of democracy. Like, I didn't believe in democracy, but I didn't think of it. It's not my own in the sense of like, I would have invented democracy even if it didn't exist, right? I mean, or human rights or whatever. But like, I can agree with them. I can say, in theory, yes, this is a good idea.
I mean, when you got your first job at a law firm,
yes.
What was that like for you? Was that not a great deal of self-sacrifice for something that you believed in?
No, I don't think I believed in the firm. It wasn't like firm.
No.
It was a firm.
What did you believe in to do something that hard?
Self-improvement, helping a client, clients, you know, achieving something, some professional, degree of professional success, doing something that was worthwhile in society, doing something that was valued, you know, by your clients, and...
But were you sure for real that was why you were doing that job?
I mean, I was pretty sure at the outset, like I wanted to go to a law firm to do all those things. Yes. at some point during the firm, you say, like in my case, some people say, yes, I love the firm and I will dedicate my life to the firm professionally. And they become, if they do it right, they're good, they become a partner. Other people might say, I'm getting along, I see this is what happens, this is what's required, do I want this? And they start questioning, like, what do I want the rest of my life to be like? And they may make, a course correction at that point and say, I didn't really know what it was, took to be a partner, or I didn't really think I would be working for these clients or doing this kind of work. And you might say, I want to do something else. And then you might go off and do that other thing, So you change the direction of your career, right? Some people leave the law altogether. I knew many people like that who were just like, I'm not that into it. Other people go to in-house, like corporations, so. Yes, what was your point? I was never like, I'm going to lay down at the altar of, the chairman of the firm, or sacrifice myself for the good of the corporation,
I think the idea is that, like, from my perspective, like, I've been going through a phase where, like, I'm a little bit skeptical of the news and, like, casual sources of information coming towards me.
Yes, good for you.
And I'm also not in a place philosophically where I have really my overall values kind of hammered out, right? So at this point in my life, if I were in charge, I would make bad decisions, right?
In charge of what?
In charge of my life, right?
Aren't you in charge of your life?
Kind of. But like, I kind of acknowledge that I don't have sufficient information for things yet, right? So, like, I guess my philosophy was similar to that found in the book, where it was like, until I know for sure what I want as a human being, it's best to adopt or join with someone who seems to know more about what they're doing and kind of just learn from them until you kind of get a ground.
I think that's a good idea. I think in general terms, that's a good idea.
And so, like, in this case, when you have access to a person who has lived and who has what you would consider success, I think it's a good model to follow until you you have that wisdom earned by blood. Instead of just like trying to follow the advice of people who are trying to give me good advice, but they're not as in depth into what I want from life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I think it's good to have mentors. It's good to be kind of it's easy for somebody to give you advice about something that you haven't done yet, right? Or you just started, or you're interested in. But until you have actually lived, that experience to some degree, you're never really going to be informed about whether that is the right path for you. Long term, right?
Yeah.
So. I think a lot of times, at least in my experience, you try to go down a certain path, and then you realize when you get down a certain, distance, that maybe that's not the right, that's not what you really want, or you didn't account or understand, what you were getting.
Yeah.
So, but it's really, I think it's, there are broad pieces of advice that I think are good, but, or, at least won't get you in too much trouble. But, that's not always going to be fulfilling to every single person. I mean, I could always sit there and say, like, oh, I love being a lawyer, and, it gives me all this satisfaction and fulfillment, and, it's a good career, has all these benefits for you. But that may, even saying that's true, and even not accounting for the downsides of it, some other person may say, that's not really for me, and that'd be an equally valid decision, right?
Yeah.
So continue on with the Hagakure. Agadashi?
Hagakure.
Okay, go on.
Yeah.
Death.
I don't know. I mean, for me, I was talking to Johnny about this, and I told you about my wooden ball project.
Yes.
Like the goal is to sand smooth a cubic wooden piece into a spherical wooden piece. And I think like it's tied into the whole my obsession with that a little bit. Partly because, well, the project itself is designed to be able to like work on something without having a goal in mind, right? Like I want to make a sphere, but I don't want a sphere, you know? Like the idea is to be able to work and not like have anything in mind but the process of working.
Mm.
And I've been kind of playing with this and trying to kind of bring it in relation to my life, where like sometimes I feel like I'm only able to do the things, or I should only do the things that will somehow be directly or indirectly beneficial to me, right? So like I'm free, I guess, but I'm limited to the things like socially speaking, which will bring me benefit, right? Like we're talking about jiu-jitsu. Like it's kind of weird to do jiu-jitsu unless you're doing it for something, unless you're trying to learn self-defense, unless you're trying to get in shape, unless you're trying to, learn how to fight. It's almost socially acceptable to just do something for the sake of doing it. And with the death thing, that's kind of related, like in the way that sometimes like I feel like I should do things in order to like bring something to me. Other times I do something so that I don't die, right? Like a lot of the things that I do in my day-to-day, not a lot, but maybe not day-to-day, but some of the things I do are like specifically designed to make sure that I don't die sometime in the future. And that's and that's super important, right? It's really good to not die. But at the same time, like, if I didn't think about these things, I would have room in my brain to think about other stuff, right? Other stuff could be anything positively beneficial to my life. And yeah, I don't know, I'm just like thinking about that, where I want to be able to do stuff knowing that I'm not doing it to prepare for the future. I'm not doing it to keep my mind off the idea that I'm going to die soon. I want to be able to do stuff to do those things and to enjoy my time doing them.
Okay.
And then once I get to that point that I know I can do this without the reasoning for any action that I have being anxiety or fear, then then you can make decisions. But I don't really know at this point in my life if I'm in charge of me in that sense. If I'm just like running away from stuff, or if I'm trying to get towards a goal that I'm not really sure is like my goal, or if it's been something that like I think I ought to have.
Yeah, I get that. I know a lot of people who they're motivated by what I would call external factors, right? Their parents wanted them to do something. They feel they need to not disappoint somebody. Sometimes they're providing, right? Like sometimes people are working jobs because that's how they provide for their families, or how they provide for themselves. And maybe they don't have any joy or very little joy in the everyday performance of that job. Maybe they take very little satisfaction out of it, but they have to do it, right? They are in service of whatever external factors that they find themselves in. I think that's very, very, very common, right? Or you make decisions about your options or your career choices based on the restraints or limitations. And those could be emotional. They could be, I'm in a relationship with somebody and they expect me to be this way, or it's your parents or your family, and you feel like, you need to do something. In the Asian community, there's lots of jokes about
Tiger moms?
Well, tiger moms, but what I was getting at was, I guess that is related to tiger moms. Like, they want to, you need to be a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, and you need to go to certain universities. And mean, that's something that I hear about from my wife all the time. And, you know, there's these external, you know, there's the pressure of, you know, my parents sacrificed so that I could go to this school or that thing or have this opportunity, and I don't want their sacrifice to be for nothing.
Yeah.
I know, you know, people who, you know, they disguise themselves in different ways. They don't come out, if, let's say they're gay, and their parents are not, you know, or their family is not accepting, and they know this, and they bury that to their parents, or to their relatives. You know, sometimes the whole family, you know, because they feel like, oh, I can't even tell my brother or my sister how I really am, because then they're gonna, and then my parents are gonna hate me, and then I'm gonna feel guilty, right? Go ahead.
So then, like, that's kind of my base argument. Like, are all of those feelings related to like worrying about disappointment and you know, these expectations created by those around you? Like, is that, if you're exercising your freedom to continue living for those people, like, how free are you?
Well, I think it's easy to say, as someone who has come from a family that had very low expectations in me, and well-deserved low expectations, I might add, that I never really felt those pressures. Mm-hmm.
So what motivated you?
I think I just was motivated by natural curiosity and natural drive to do as well as I could at whatever it was.
What was your measure of success?
I think, I mean, it depends on what it is, right? Like, everyone has a different measure. You know, some people, you know, if they don't, I mean, I guess it's what are your expectations of yourself? Like, I never really had any even internal expectations, mm-hmm. right? Like, I tried my best. I studied hard. I worked hard. And then I figured, well, if I study hard and I work hard, and I try to do the right things, right, that are going to lead me, make these decisions that are going to guide me towards whatever the goal is I had at the moment, whatever I got. There was no, I mean, I thought, you know, generally you think, if I work hard, I'll do well. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always work that way. You can work really hard, you know, and not meet your goals or not meet your expectations. That happens all the time, you know. But having said that, you know, it's one of those, it's the working hard is a necessary but not a sufficient element, right? It's the difference between those two things. And you need to work hard. Like, there's nothing, you can't, I don't think you can be truly successful, or at least reach your potential, or come close to reaching your potential if you don't work hard. Almost by definition, right? Like, even if you're amazing, naturally talented, and you're a Hall of Fame level,
your potential is just way up here.
I mean, you could be a Hall of Fame. You could be someone who's really good at something, but you know, you could have been the best that ever did something, or you know, some scale of that. So I always felt like, hey, if I just work hard, it was almost like this self-discovery. Like, let's see how far I can get if I just if I do this. And so it was never like I had a thing a thing that I needed to strive for, that I would feel like no matter what, I would measure my success or failure based on my achievement of this thing. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people have that. They set their goal very high, which I think is a good thing, to set your goal high. But then they judge themselves based on whether they succeed or fail in that one way. Mm-hmm. And so then, you know, for me, it was always like the process. I always enjoyed the process of doing this thing. And I was like, hey, if I can reach that, that'd be great. Let's see how high I can go, right? As opposed to everything that I'm doing is to get that thing, and if I don't get it, then everything I did was a failure, right? If I don't meet either my own or somebody else's expectation, then I am therefore a failure. And I mean, that's the mindset that I've had, I think. And so it becomes easier. It's almost easier to both succeed and fail, Because there's, like some people set their bars really low.
Yeah.
And they hit that bar and then they stop and they say, hey, I've done it, right? And I think that's a mistake too, if your expectations are so low. And likewise, if your expectations are super high, it may not be realistic, or it may be something that there's a lot of chance that's involved, That's not always up to you. And no matter how hard you work, there's a high chance that you will not achieve this thing, right? And that could be like anything. That could just be, I know in my case, like people who get partnerships or they get judgeships, you can work really hard. You can be super smart. You could have all the qualifications, but at some point, these decisions are not yours to make. There's somebody else involved in the equation, maybe more than one. And that person may just arbitrarily decide that you're not the right fit for whatever it is. It could be a referee in a match, right? If you're an athlete, and the referee might make a bad call.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's it. Doesn't matter how hard you've worked. Or you could get this, how many times do you see this? Like, people are competing in jiu-jitsu, someone does something, or doesn't do something, and they get disqualified. That's it. Doesn't matter how hard you've worked. Maybe you just made a mistake. Maybe the ref wasn't even paying attention.
You slapped the guy and said sorry.
Or whatever, right? It could be anything.
Yeah.
And there's no recourse. That's it. You're done. You went to the World Championships. You get DQ'd in third. It gets worse as you get up higher on the ladder. But you get DQ'd 4 matches in for either a careless mistake on your part or just a total flub by the ref's part. And that's it. Or maybe you get injured. Like maybe something you slip on a wet spot on the mat and you blow out your knee. Like that happens. Like who was it? There was a match. Or here's another one that's just great. Perfect, right? Heartbreaking. Johnny Palma. He tearing it up one year at World. I think it was Worlds or could have been Europeans. I forget. What happens? He meets Lucas Lepre. Hey man, you gotta forfeit the match. You gotta bow out because Lucas is the man. Your turn will come sometime, but this year it's going to be Lucas Lepre's 5th World Championship. He's the senior student. You got to step aside. Johnny Palma, man, tears in his eyes, man, steps aside. That's it. All that hard work, done. That's it.
Should have gone Ronin.
Huh?
Should have gone Ronin.
Hey, you got to die for your master, right? So, like these things happen in people's lives. Look, that could have been Johnny Palma's year.
Yeah.
That could have been his year. And how many times do you have that opportunity, in your life?
4.
What?
4.
4, maybe?
Just put a number.
Could be once. That could be it. There's guys, they're really good guys who could never, climb that mountain. So, you build yourself up. I think I've told you about Kerry Kolat, who was probably the best American wrestler of his era. And he got cheated a bunch of times out of the World Championships and, the Olympics. And, I think his year, we may have had to boycott. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure if that was true, but I know he didn't get an Olympic medal.
But Tanya Harding?
Tanya Harding? You mean, who was the other one? That was Nancy Kerrigan who got kneecapped, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Wait, who am I thinking of?
Tanya Harding was the one who got her boyfriend to go kneecap Nancy Kerrigan.
That's what I meant.
Right?
To get Tanya Harding.
So that she could get.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I think you're correct in general that sometimes you can sit down and say, why am I doing what I am doing? Sometimes you're making a sacrifice. I think everyone can think of, maybe not everybody, but I think a lot of people can say, like, they can recognize, like, your parents made a sacrifice for you, or your grandparents made a sacrifice for them, or, people, they make decisions based on what they think is the best interest of their children or their family or their loved ones or whatever. And you can make that sacrifice. Like people do it all the time, and that's an honorable thing to do, but you have to be comfortable. If it's not forced on, it's not a sacrifice if it's forced on you, right? Like that's just a shitty hand that you got dealt, right? If it's I could only get the job in the coal mine, then that's not a sacrifice to work in the coal mine, right? Like I gotta work in the coal mine.
Yeah. You always have that option out that the Japanese had. That's frowned upon. But no one talks about it, but it's there.
Well, I think there's, in Japanese society for a certain time, that was the honorable thing to do. And it may have done, you know, if you live in that cultural environment, I don't know what the right word, in that culture, where your dishonor can stain your whole family, right? Unless you take you make the ultimate sacrifice, then people are going to make the ultimate sacrifice, right?
I don't really think of it as like the ultimate sacrifice. I think of it as like the ultimate way of avoiding your problems.
Well, but I think that was different for them than it is for us. And for us, that's not what happens. In our culture, you know, it's not considered to be honorable to fall on your sword. Yeah. I mean, if you're ancient Rome or Japan, okay, there's some shame that you carry, and by taking your own life, there's a cultural, I mean, I'm not sure if that's still true, but there must have been some sort of cultural acceptance of like, that is the right thing to do. But I've never heard of anyone sort of like, even as you pose the issue, right? It's the ultimate way of getting out of your problems, right? It's an escape. That's not, escaping something is not considered honorable in our society.
What?
And I don't think...
We teach escapes all the time.
No, it's not jiu-jitsu escapes, right? I mean, but that's the thing of like, you know, there are things that happen, or that people have done throughout the ages that made sense in their particular time, place, and cultural circumstances, right? But, I mean, that's why I always say, like, look, I mean, the samurai were super cool, and there's a lot of good things that you can take from that culture. Not everything, not everything.
What is nice though is like, it takes the argument that you didn't have a choice. You know, people are always like, oh, I only did this because I didn't have any choice in the matter. I had to because of this situation.
Oh, you mean the samurais?
Yeah,
but is it a choice? Because that was something that was expected of them
from
the
beginning, that's
right?
The
like
choice.
Death before dishonor.
Like, you can do this thing that you know you should do, or you could choose to do this other thing. It's not that, like, you didn't have a choice in the matter. Like, you do. But it's definitely yours. Like, it forces you to take responsibility for things that you normally wouldn't want to take responsibility for.
What is it? What practice?
The seppuku type thing, where it's like, it's forced accountability. It takes, I don't know, I haven't formed this well enough in my head yet.
Well, I mean, I think it's, that was my understanding was that, like, that was, like, you were defeated, or you took your own life.
But it's understood that that's an option. Like, when I'm working with kids,
yes.
Like, you know, something happens, and then I look over and I see one kid, you know, punch another kid. You're like, yo, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, like, he hit me, like, I didn't have any choice. Well, like, if you teach them early on that you have the choice between doing this thing that you feel like might be out of your control, and you just, like, it's a thing that you have to do, or the choice between, like, controlling yourself,
yes,
and not controlling yourself, it just, I don't know, it gives you a more concrete sense that you could do another thing if you took the time to think about it. You know, it's like, I have the choice between waking up every morning and drinking a cup of coffee, or, like, killing myself. That's the old saying. Or, like,
that's an old saying.
Like,
I've never heard that one.
Like, I should feel like when something happens to me and I feel reactionary, it's like I can make the choice between doing this thing and causing harm to a person that will have consequences not just on myself and those around me, or I could not.
But I don't know how that equates to seppuku, right? Like, to me, and I'll confess, I don't know every circumstance that a samurai would be forced to kill themselves or be allowed to kill. I mean, they might be allowed. Like, that was like in Rome, or Greece, you know, it was like, hey, we can either kill you or you can take care of yourself. You know, so you decide what you want, and it was, you know, you wouldn't want to put. I mean, it was almost like in Rome or in Western culture, it's almost like the ultimate act of autonomy, right? Like, I'm not going to allow you to dishonor me with however you're going to do your thing. Like, I'm going to take my own life. That's my ultimate act of self-ownership, if you will, right? This is my, you know, it's my life. I'll take myself out if that's what it comes to, right? Usually that happens at the end of a long, tragic arc, you know, of some sort or another. Like, you don't just, like, wake up one day and say, all right, I'm going to do the honorable thing and just off myself, right? It's usually like you're given an ultimatum of, we're either going to torture you and do terrible things to you, or the mob is going to get a hold of you, tear you to pieces, or here you go, here's some hemlock. Which way do you want to go?
Or in cases where you were in battle and you were outnumbered.
And you do you die on your sword, right?
No, you go in there and you kill as many of those people.
Right. Okay. So then you just go. But what happens if
it's like
your sword breaks? You're at your enemy's.
You keep killing, like you.
Well, that's it. You
just keep killing until they kill you.
You pass out. You trip. You hit your head on a rock.
And
you come to, and you're at your enemy's mercy. And the guy at the is like, listen, you're an honorable guy. You went out fighting. Here's your dagger.
Yeah.
You know what to do.
Well,
right? I mean, that's not really a choice in that moment. It is a choice. It's a hard choice. But it's, if you said, would you rather be torn apart by the mob or like have some poison and make it quick and because what did they do? They would disembowel themselves and then somebody would lop their head off before they screamed, right?
Yeah,
so it was ritual. You still actually got beheaded by some other person.
Well, only after you made the
yes, but that was the thing. You had that
trigger.
That choice, if you will, right? Like that, but you didn't actually kill yourself that way.
No,
that would be a really long and painful death.
The guy beheading you, that's a mercy.
Yes.
That is to make that's so that you're willing to cut yourself in the first place.
So that's
if they didn't have the second, no one's.
Could you just be like, hey, listen, I don't want to stab myself. Can you just behead me? Would they do that?
No.
You had to do the first cut.
You would have to do the first cut. From what I've read, I don't know. I didn't live there, but.
I mean, that's almost like punishment to me. Like, you got to go and do that before I cut your head off. Why don't you just cut my head off, dude?
Because it's the ritual.
I know, but where does it come from? Like, why is that considered to be? Is it a self-ownership? It's like you're saying an accountability. Like, hey, I failed. I got to do this.
I wouldn't be able to speak on it honestly. I have ideas. I'm not able to share them. But yeah, I don't know. You should read the book.
But those guys, right? They were off like trying to do something.
Well,
it wasn't like they were
like samurai weren't. It's like if you join the army, right? You're in the army. You're in the army. The army has potato peelers. The army has gunners. There's a lot of people in the army.
Sure.
Right. So when you say
none of them are expected to kill themselves at the end of the battle.
I mean, some samurai had different expectations, more expectations. Like
I'm sure there were some cowardly, or not, at least not cowardly, but samurai that were not down with these,
just like
suicidal.
Any group of people.
I guess not really suicidal.
It is like it's still killing.
Well, what would happen if you refused? If you were just like, no, dude, you gotta kill me.
Why would you refuse?
No, but I'm just asking, what would happen? Did that ever happen? Did somebody say like, no, you're gonna have to do whatever you're gonna do, and then you get tortured?
I think the issue also becomes like, what happens to your family? If you do it the right way.
That's what I was getting at, right?
If you do it the right way, the odds that your family's going to be taken care of are pretty good.
Okay.
If you run away, the odds of your family being taken care of.
There you go. You have this motivation. You're living for somebody else, right? Like, you're making a sacrifice in that respect. Although,
and that sacrifice,
again,
it's not always just for your family. The overall idea is that your sacrifice is for the betterment of society and culture, right? Like you made the mistake, we're going to replace you, and the next person is going to know that they can't make.
So how did it work? At the end of a big battle, would they just say, go to everybody on the one side that lost and be like, all right, guys, you can pull out your knives?
I don't know. I think sometimes.
Or was it like the leadership? Was it like the top guys?
It was leaders. I'm not certain, honestly, but.
And then I seem to remember, like sometimes, like if the samurai, like the head of the samurai family had to commit suicide, then like the whole family did it too. Like the wife was supposed to kill herself.
Depends on the situation, I think. Like if there was a coup of some kind, that would be not.
Like you're probably gonna die anyway.
Unless you win.
No, but I'm saying you've lost. Like the army was defeated. They're coming to the castle. Like, do you really want to find out what they're gonna do to you?
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't pretty. If they showed up and they found anything other than your lifeless body in there, if there were going to be some bad, it was probably going to be worse.
Most of my opinions have been formed by James Clavell novels, so I could be completely off base with all of my opinions.
It's just an interesting thing. It was a long, like you're saying, we tend to think of one, if we think of anything, like one kind of situation, The Last Samurai, that's how it all was, because that's the last movie I saw about the samurai. If I talked about, what was the other, Sword of Doom, awesome movie. Have you ever seen Sword of Doom? Dude, you have to watch Sword of Doom. You have to watch that movie. Have you really never watched that movie? Please, just go watch that movie. You will love it. Really? Have you watched any of the Kurosawa stuff?
Who?
You're messing with me, right?
Was this from the 70s or something?
I don't even know what to say right now, people. I mean, I'm trying to guide you, Kevin. Really, are you messing with me?
I don't know what
Are you messing with me?
No, I don't know what you're talking about. Did it come from a movie? No? Okay. Anyway.
Well, Kung Fu movies are awesome.
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Alright, I'm gonna write down a list of movies that you need to go watch. You're messing with me, right?
No.
You're totally messing with me.
I really like the idea of...
What I was gonna say was, you know, we have this idea of like, you know, there's this one person's artistic interpretation of like one incident or one period or one story, but we're really talking about, you know, 750 or 1,000 years or something, you know, where multiple periods, and you know, there were obviously different things were happening in different places, and it's hard to generalize. You know, okay, but I'm still gonna go with the Tom Cruise version.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean that's the best one.
everyone is perfect. Everyone is perfect.
Oh yes.
They're all perfect, which I thought was brilliant.
That guy from Inception.
Such a great movie too.
What's his name?
I forget, but he was awesome.
Anyway. Yeah, I just really like the idea of like choosing a set of values and sticking with it, you know? And that's something that the samurai tell us that they did really well. You know, they
well,
have
one guy who wrote the book down, you know, he's the one who was like,
I mean,
but we don't know about the rest of them, right? Like, they may have been, it's like the Bible, right? Like, you read the Bible, and hey, this is a great idea, but like, how many people actually live the Bible? Small percentage, right?
I mean, I would agree with that as
In
well.
general, we all have these great ideals, but a tiny fraction, we call them saints, and a lot of them are not actually saints, would live that life, you know? Anyway.
I don't know, there's a value in self-sacrifice, but not meaningless self-sacrifice.
Maybe that's the ultimate value of self-sacrifice, the meaninglessness. It's like altruistic.
Pure altruism.
There is no meaning to it. I just do it because.
Well, what's his name? Who was the Buddha? The Buddha had a name. Siddhartha something. He went through that process, right? Where he like gave away all of his possessions and went around being all possessionless. You know how it goes. And then the story is, what's the story? He was walking by like a sailor and the sailor's apprentice, and then he was like, the sailor was like, don't knot the knot too tight, don't knot it too loose, right? And then the idea was like, you shouldn't completely sacrifice yourself, like you shouldn't be too tight, right? Because then
moderation.
There's not enough like wiggle room or
yes.
anything, you're just gonna snap.
Yeah.
And if it's too loose, it's not useful. It just falls apart. You gotta find that sweet,
happy medium,
like right in the middle between loose and tight. And
is that what the Buddha says?
I don't know. It's just a story.
I mean,
but so like there should, I feel like there should be self-sacrifice, but for something that you agree with, and that's one thing about the samurai that I liked. And I don't know. Just.
I mean, I think of the samurai, and this could be totally inaccurate, as like you're essentially born into it, and you're born with a set of very clear expectations. Now, maybe those expectations changed over time, but you essentially are like, here, you are born into a clan. Here is the code that you must follow. It's a very orderly thing, and you know, you're going to enjoy a relatively high status in society. But here's the downside.
Kill yourself.
I mean, if you mess up, you're going to wind up killing yourself. Or if I mess up, you're going to kill yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
that's true, though.
Kind of feudal society in general, right? Like, hey, I'm the king, you're the knight, you're going to march off to battle, and
but the king has to know that.
And I'm going to give you some cool stuff if we win. If we die, we're all going to die together.
But if the king messes up, like, wasn't the turnover for like top leadership really high? Like, I don't know how much better that is. I feel like it's better to be like a mid-level guy who just really agrees with the group. You know?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I don't know what would happen, you know, when, you know, the regime was toppled. But I'm sure if you were like relatively high up, you're probably on the out. Like there were a lot of people when certain like very peripheral people, when the regimes would change, they would get the hell out of the country.
Yeah.
Right? They were like, it's not safe for like, so like Locke, if my understanding, if
my recollection serves, he basically was attached to the Earl of Shaftesbury, and the Earl was buddy-buddy with, I think they were Protestants, right? So they were on that side of the English Revolution, and then when there was a restoration, right, of the monarchy, they and now I could be mangling this, but maybe I'm confusing with somebody else, but in general, what you would in that situation, John Locke wasn't somebody with guns and running around and killing anybody. He was, he was a writer. But when the king, when he would spend all his time saying why the monarchy was crap, and then the king's like, really?
Let's just turn this off.
He went over to Europe and he hid out where he was safe. That was the environment.
He went to Europe?
Well, yeah, because the English, he was I believe that Locke was Calvinist. He was Protestant.
Where was he born?
In England.
Yeah, so then he went
but it was,
to Europe?
So then when the king was Catholic and came back, was restored. I think Charles was Catholic. I could be getting this wrong. But if, at some point, if you were I believe in the Pope, right? If the English monarch, who was not a pope, a papist, as they called it, you better get that out of town because they're going to burn you at the stake.
But isn't England in Europe?
Yes, but to the continent, right? Over to France or to the Netherlands or, somewhere where, whatever, his religious affiliation would, the English king couldn't just march over and be like, hey, give me that dude.
Yeah.
You'd be protected.
He didn't go to France?
I
thought all the people who hated England went to France.
Switzerland. I don't know. I have to go back and look. But the general, whether it was Locke or not, this is what happened, right? You were part of a household of a prominent family, and that family was on the wrong end of whatever revolution happened or changing of the regime.
Every revolution.
And then you got the hell out.
You get a purge. Every revolution, you get a free purge.
Well, you think. You're to the question of the question is how far down do people get purged?
Yeah.
Right? Well, if you work for the dude who's then you're going to wind up getting purged.
A little bit.
Maybe.
You don't want to be too close. Yeah.
But
at the same time, if you take over a place or you reestablish control, you can't kill all of the administrators because nothing's going to get done. There's got to be a balance.
Yeah, but there's a difference between the civil servants who are filling out the ledgers and the guy who's
you kill the top guy.
Your intellectual.
Yeah,
that dude you need to kill.
You don't want to kill the people who
kill the
do
smart
actual work.
You kill all the lawyers.
And 1/3 of the bosses probably. Because
it's like when Caesar marched back into Rome. Cicero got the hell out. And then it was later. Caesar was very generous and was like, "Hey, you can come back. Nothing will happen to you." And then they killed Caesar, and then they went after Cicero. Yeah. He was not a.
Did Brutus really stab Caesar in the back? Or?
I wasn't there. As old as I am, I was not there for that.
Well, I was thinking, or was that a euphemism?
I don't know. That's why, because everyone would make fun of Caesar as being gay or whatever.
Not gay, just
Cured by.
No, just about him.
I don't know. He got stabbed by a lot of people. I don't think they all stabbed him in the back. Maybe a few did. I don't know. It's a good question. It's another example of history being written by the victors. So who knows, really, how it all went down. But yeah.
Fun. I don't know.
Just saying, you were a member of a ruling class. You had taken staked out a certain position. When the other side wins, you need to get out of Dodge.
Yeah. I always thought it was
I think he was tracked down and murdered, actually. I think Cicero was tracked down. He fled, and they tracked him down, and they murdered him.
What did he do? I don't know.
He just wrote a lot of stuff that they didn't like. And did he was a consul, right? He was a very high-ranking.
To Caesar?
No. He was there were consuls of Rome. He was a senator, and then he became consul. So that means he was the head dude and then after that you become a proconsul.
So you go from consul to PC?
Well, you kind of consul's the highest, and you become a proconsul, which is kind of retirement semi, but you're still there for continuity's sake, and then you go back down to the Senate. But I didn't know in Roman society there were certain numbers of family. There were set numbers of families, and there were senatorial families. There were equestrian, called the equestrian class. There was there was another one called the decennial class, I think. But these were very specific ranks of families, and you
you had a certain status within that society.
Yeah.
And Cicero was one of the last examples of somebody who came from a relatively low caste. I mean, he wasn't a peasant, he wasn't a slave, and rose all the way up to becoming a consul.
Yeah, probably was propaganda.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
That he was consul? No, it probably was consul. But,
no, the idea that a person can rise from nearly nothing to...
I mean, he wasn't nearly nothing, right? Like, his family was a well-off, landowning Roman family, like long-established, well-connected family. They just weren't at the level of a senatorial family, right? I mean, it's kind of like you can be in the top 10% of society, like financially or economically of a society. Everyone would be like, you're doing pretty good. But the difference between somebody who's in the top 10% and like Jeff Bezos or, Warren Buffett, like,
it's a different universe.
It's a magnitudes,
yeah.
of greaticity.
Did we talk about?
We didn't talk about what you wanted to talk about.
What death?
I thought we were talking about not tapping too, or not being worried about tapping.
Oh, like equating death to tapping?
Yeah, I wasn't sure I was on board with that one either, but I do agree that you shouldn't worry about tapping.
I feel like it's the same. Like, when you're not afraid of dying, metaphorically speaking, in jiu-jitsu, you're not afraid of making mistakes, then you're gonna do things. You're gonna do stuff.
Yes.
And you're not gonna hesitate, and you're not gonna hold yourself back, and you're not gonna cry when things go wrong.
Yes.
You're gonna accept things how they are, and everything's gonna be fine, right?
Yes.
And every once in a while you'll die. That's fine.
Don't worry about tapping.
Yeah. And same for life. If you just accept that bad things are gonna happen, and you don't let that be the way that you make your decisions.
Don't live a life of fear.
Yeah.
I agree. You shouldn't worry about failure.
It's hard though. Because like in jiu-jitsu it's nice because like you're just investing 30 seconds into something, and if it goes wrong you just like start over. But with real life stuff it's like you could invest 5 years in a thing, and it's like
well, but failure is all relative, right? Like there are a lot of people who they don't maybe they fail at something, but there's always that idea of failing upwards or failing
yeah, I only fail at failing.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Thank you.
But I think in terms of jiu-jitsu, you see the people who come in the beginning, they don't want to ever tap, right? Yeah. Not everybody, but a lot of people that come in and they don't want to tap, and they're like get upset about getting tapped. And then after a little while, they get kind of used to it, and they're like, yeah, I'm getting tapped all over the place, and they almost appreciate it. And then they get to like purple belt level, and now they hate being tapped anymore, right? Like so, there's like that sweet spot of not caring, and then you get good enough, or you think you're good enough that you're like, hey, I'm a purple belt now, or I'm a brown belt.
I got these expectations.
And now you're like, I can't be tapped.
Yeah.
And then I think there's the next level where, like what you're saying, where you get to the point where you realize that not worrying about getting tapped all the time is actually a liberating thing.
Yeah.
But you have to check your ego. To me, it's always ego. It's an ego check. Right? I mean, if what you care about, it's because you're going to train, like to your point, you're going to train totally differently. Totally differently, it's terrible English. You're going to train differently. Totally. If you only care about not getting tapped, right? Like you're not, and I think this actually goes, we talk about plateauing in jiu-jitsu, and I think this may have something to do with that, in the sense that, when are you learning the most? In the beginning, when you're getting tapped and you kind of almost accept it.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just like, okay, I got tapped, but you don't let that, you don't dwell on that, you just keep going.
Yeah.
And you just get back on the horse.
Yep.
Right? If, on the other hand, and you see this too with people who are not as willing to have that mentality, even in the beginning, where they just are constantly only worried about not getting tapped. And their progress slows down. Because you're just like this. I mean, it's hard to do jiu-jitsu like this. It's hard to do anything like this. It's hard to get you, right? If I just hold, you're not going to arm lock me, right? If I just do this, you're not going to arm lock me.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I mean, maybe somebody who's really big and strong. It could make me so uncomfortable that I'll give my arm up. But if I just do this, and I'm on average about as strong as everyone else, it's going to be really, I mean, you might want to foot lock me then. Yeah. Or I could just like, no, you're not allowed to foot lock me.
I'll just neon bell you until you...
Or whatever, right? But what am I getting out of that whole process?
you are getting something.
You're getting something, but to your, but you're not. What you're not doing is you're not like being proactive
stuff
in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
You're so, when you think of getting capped as like making a mistake or as a failure, then we have a natural tendency to avoid failure, to avoid mistakes, and thinking that this is like the right way to do things.
Yeah.
As opposed to do your jiu-jitsu, and if you get caught, you get caught. But eventually, what happens is you stop getting caught.
Yep.
If you're open to it, right? Now you're probably still gonna get caught.
Yeah.
But at some point, you free yourself from that kind of baggage or that fear or whatever it is, and that is liberating. And that can go with not just tapping, but like people passing your guard, people taking your back, or any of the bad things that can happen in jiu-jitsu. We tend to avoid. We don't want it to happen. And if you just constantly play that game of like, I don't want it to, like, you just retreat into a shell and you play essentially defensive jiu-jitsu. And with experience, you can get really good at just playing defensive jiu-jitsu to the point where nobody wants to train with you anymore. But you don't actually develop any kind of offense or ability to transition from a bad situation to a good situation, or to turn something, to just be able to transition from, maybe you're escaping into something else, into something good, right? I mean, that's
the ability to act in transitions instead of at the points where positions are defined. Like,
yes,
when you're not, cause let's take a sweep for example. Like, I'm trying to pass the guard and I get swept. When I was a white belt, I'd be like, fuck.
yeah.
As I go down, it's like you're just filled with disappointment and self-hatred. Not a lot, but it's like,
Yes.
man,
I messed up.
Yeah.
You're just like kicking yourself on the way.
Yeah, you spend all that time and energy just doing nothing productive, but like just being sad, disappointed.
Yes.
Versus like when you no longer care that you get swept, then mid-sweep you start seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
At the end of sweep you have an opportunity because you're no longer thinking about what you just lost. You still have stuff.
There's opportunity.
You still have opportunity in there somewhere if you would just look for it.
If you hadn't held on.
Yeah.
Right? If you hadn't resisted, past the point of where it makes sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and this goes even beyond just like tapping, not tapping, or transition. Sometimes, you get into a point where it's a good point, right? Like you have somebody stacked, or you have a grip, or you have something that is good, right? Like, okay, I'm on top, and I can just say, like, how many times have you had where somebody's in your guard, right? Whether it's open or closed, and they just crunch down, and they're not even really trying to pass anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like camped out, and they're just, the person who, there's 5 minutes on the clock, and all they want to do is not get tapped, and there's 5 minutes, and maybe it's not even just like I curl up, it's you play guard and I just stay on top. I'm not really trying to pass. And if it ever comes to the point where you might have something, right? Or I might have to like kind of risk a little something to pass. I just come back and I hunker down and I just play that negative jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Right? Now there are times in competition where you have to do that, and that is not an insignificant skill.
There's time in training to do that too.
But if you do that all the time, and that's like your whole perspective of like, hey, I won because, Kevin didn't tap me because I just like held him down in the guard. Now, that's a skill. I'm not saying that's insignificant, but that is, you should recognize that for what it is. And if you're not specifically working on getting really good at just holding someone down, which is hard to do, it can be hard to do depending on who you're trying to hold down. You're not going to get very good. Like you're impeding your own progress.
Well, people should also know that if nobody tapped, it was a tie. Like it could be.
But see, that's the thing.
You could have 25 points on me to 0. If you didn't tap me, that was a tie.
What I was going to say is, if we're in a competition, right, and medals are being given out, and there's a referee, right?
It's still a tie.
A tie is a tie.
Sure, yeah.
Right? But if we're training in a training room and there's no referee and we're not keeping score, then we're not keeping score.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not
like I said, if the purpose of training is to get better at jiu-jitsu, which I think is generally, would you agree that is the purpose of training?
No.
One of the purposes of training is to get better at jiu-jitsu?
One could.
A lot of people think that training will get them better at jiu-jitsu. Maybe not you. Maybe not you, but I think a lot of people, their purpose is to get better, to improve at jiu-jitsu. Playing to the tie is not the way to do it. Put yourself out there. Try to pass. Try to sweep. Try to submit. Do your best to like play positive jiu-jitsu.
Can I go back to your point earlier on like why you chose your career? You know, like you wanted to do things that you weren't sure that you could do.
Oh, I always knew I could do it.
No, but like
yes.
with jiu-jitsu, with this, like sometimes you roll with that person who you're not even sure that you could stay in their guard for a whole round.
Sure.
You know, and you know, having that time to hunker down and have like a really boring roll could be necessary. But I do agree that like if that is your approach,
like you shouldn't be doing that every time you come
probably
and
not
train.
every time. You shouldn't be patting yourself on the back if you can consistently hold everybody down. If you couldn't before, now you can.
Well, who are you, right? Like, if you're the biggest person, if you're 300 pounds and you're like, hey, I held the 150-pound guy down, well,
depends on who that 150-pound guy is.
If it's just a random dude who, you know,
if
works,
it's a random dude, then like maybe it's time to start opening up your game.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You know, put yourself out there a little bit. Don't worry about getting tapped.
But I think that's a normal process. Like,
yes,
you're gonna get bored eventually sitting there.
Not necessarily. No, some people will continue to do that because they don't want to get better.
But that's not why people do things. Nobody does a thing in jiu-jitsu for the purpose of not getting better.
No, but they're happy to not get better
That's
if
fine.
they can not get better with what they perceive of as dignity and honor.
That's okay too.
I'm happy just like, I mean, it's one of those questions. If you ask somebody, okay, here's the deal. It's kind of like immovable force versus the irresistible object. If you just said to somebody, all right, you'll never win anything, you'll never react, but you could never be tapped. Like you'd be untappable in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to tap anybody either.
Uh-huh.
Do you think people would take that?
I would take that, and I would design some very specific tournaments. Like cash prize, you know, come tap Kevin. If you win, you get $1 million. If you lose, Kevin gets $20. I'd do that. That sounds awesome.
Nobody wants to watch.
Yo, do you know how many DVDs you could put out as like being the guy who could never be tapped?
No, but I mean
that would be amazing.
No, I don't think.
No, it's like I would start calling out Gordon. I would start calling out Andre. Like come out here, like try and tap me. You know, I know for a fact I can't tap you, but like you're not really sure that you can't tap me. You know, let's find out.
I don't think anybody. I mean, I remember Andre after he had that match, that Metamoris match. But no, with Henner. Or no, it was Huron. Whatever, Huron, I think. And like Huron didn't actually at the end. Andre was like had tried so hard that he was tired.
Yeah.
But he spent 20 minutes trying to like basically just manhandle him.
Yes.
And I was impressed. I mean, anybody who can stay. Anybody who can not get tapped
by Andre
Guevara for 20 minutes. I mean, look, you tip your hat to him. But I'm not going to buy his DVDs.
Well, if he did that to every single person, if he went to Gordon and that, if he did to Andre, like
he would, you know, the thing was is that he was, and look, I shouldn't say this as a criticism, but I don't know. I mean, there's the famous Gracie adage of like, just because you can't win doesn't mean you have to lose.
Yeah, that was their thing.
That idea of like if I can just weather the storm.
Yeah.
But you know, if I step back. And I go back to like the first time I ever saw jiu-jitsu. I think I speak for a lot of people. If Royce Gracie had just come out and had managed to fight to a draw, I don't think there would be that many people doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The idea was like the compelling argument that the Gracie family made was that you could be 170 pounds and beat anybody. With jiu-jitsu. That was the argument.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean? Like,
but they were also untappable. Like that was their selling point for before the UFC.
Well, they started getting beat.
No, like their whole thing when I was coming up, the joke was the Gracies would name any move after a judoka that beat them, right?
Okay.
Ezekiel, Kimura, two moves, right?
Okay.
Those are the two people in the Gracie history that beat the Gracies.
How come they don't name anything after Sakuraba?
I think that came after.
Because he beat like 5 of them.
Yeah.
He beat everybody.
Yeah.
So I remember, like, I remember
that was
watching that, right? Like, I remember watching
Yeah.
Sakuraba just dismantle everybody,
Yeah.
right? And, you know, the Gracie, not the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because he was doing something, I know he's more of a catch person, like he identifies moves catch, but, you know, like for me, you know, grappling was grappling. At that point, I didn't know what catch really was.
Yeah.
It was Jiu-Jitsu as far as I was concerned, right?
Yeah.
But, so it wasn't like watching a boxer take apart, you know, 5 Gracie family members. It was, you know, it was a wrestler, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, he did beat the hell out of him too.
Yeah.
But it was a little more acceptable because, I mean, he was doing some form
But
of
there is
grappling.
still
But none of those guys, I mean, those guys all got beat. They all got smashed, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So-
I'm not saying like the Gracies were never beaten, but like there was a time when they, above all else, valued their unbeatability.
yes, they're untappability,
That's what I meant.
right? I mean, they got beat.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I mean, no matter
they
who
could not be submitted.
They couldn't be submitted.
They could have their arms broken. They could be.
Somebody else could give up for them. Somebody else
Yeah.
could run over,
We'll
but
throw-
they would not.
We'll throw the
Elliot
towel.
was just being personally tough.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it wasn't. It's an interesting take on things, right? Like there was a general argument that, you know, jiu-jitsu was this perfect system, right? Which was false, right? Because they did lose, right? And there were draws, and you know, and then it kind of shifted to, well, maybe I lost, but I didn't give up,
Yeah.
right? Like I didn't tap.
Yes.
He broke my arm in a million places, and if I hadn't tapped, then he probably would have murdered me in 10 other ways. Because, I mean, once your arm's broken, you know, I think you're pretty much done. You know, if Kimura has you in his
Jacques
clutches...
would like to join the chat right now.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's because there's a minute left in that match. So just imagine it's Kimura in there, and there's no time limit. So after he's done breaking your arm,
Breaks the other one.
he's going to come and he's going to get you. There's nowhere to run. That's it. He's going to track you down, and he's going to break your other arm. And then if you don't tap, because you don't have any arms to tap with anymore, he's going to, like, put you to sleep.
I have a thing.
Yeah, what's your thing?
Oh wait, hold on. It's gone.
Is Jacare really calling for the chat?
No.
That would be awesome.
Hold on. Can you go back to the top before it?
That just being new, like just not losing was not a
Oh
compelling
yeah,
argument.
the rule, my rule. The first rule, if you want to win, you first have to not lose, right? So like, you need to be able to survive the rule.
Yes.
You need to be able to survive, right?
Okay, that's
and,
true.
And it's
Yeah, but I think you have to change, like, you have to recognize that there's different, that rule, that idea, is applicable in some ways, in some contexts more than it is in others, right? Like, so we're talking about training. Training, I don't think that's the greatest rule, or rule of thumb.
it's a good. I would agree.
In competition, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
sure.
Competition, it's like if you first start with surviving,
But
and then you can talk about winning.
it also it's a good way to like put together how you would like approach training, right? Like in order to win, you first have to not lose. That means, you know, if you're starting to train, maybe you should prioritize defense. You know, learning defensive techniques. Not necessarily when you're rolling, you're prioritizing defending. It's that when you study jiu-jitsu in your free time, when you're training moves with your training partners, when you choose out of all the techniques that you could learn for that day, you know, maybe choose one that's more related to not losing.
You know, it's interesting because I think it's different for different people. Because if you come in and you're not physically, or the most athletic person in the room, or the biggest person in the room, you are going to spend a lot of time on the bottom, right? Playing defense. And it's almost a necessity that you are going to start learning how to play defense before you start learning offense. But and I've trained with guys like this, guys who are very athletic, very strong, very big, they spend a lot of time on offense, right? And they can get really good on offense and not have to have very good defense. And then what happens is what happens to those guys. At some point they get put on their backs, or someone gets on their back, and it's pretty much over, right? They never go. I mean, if I can just throw everyone down the ground, pass their guard, and choke them out, or break their arms, I'm just going to keep spamming that every day.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard for that person to kind of step back and say, you know what, maybe I should work a little bit on my defense. Maybe I should let the guys get my back.
Why would I step back and think a thought unless there was a reason?
What I'm saying, it's hard.
No, like,
what's the reason?
No, like,
the reason
I
is
just
that
got
eventually,
snatched. Like I just got everything that I ever knew didn't work.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you should probably think about working on something. You know, like if you have a reason to. What I don't like, I've been wanting to make this point all the time. Like people focus too much on what people in tournaments are doing, highest levels are doing.
True.
Like, what is your training partner doing that you can't figure out?
I agree.
You know, like
I agree.
Your training partner is doing stuff to you that you can't handle, and you know.
Yeah, but they couldn't do it to Rafa Mendes.
Yeah, but like you know, until you know how to deal with a scissor sweep, that should be
true.
Your
I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
And it doesn't have to be like it should.
Nobody does scissor sweeps in tournaments.
A person should focus on
Nobody plays close guard anymore, Kevin.
People should focus on solving the problems being presented by their training partners, and that will get everybody better. If I'm over here studying like reverse de la Hiva and nobody in my gym is doing knee cut, then what good is it? Maybe,
I mean, you can still do good stuff.
I could still do stuff, but compared to me getting good at a thing that will counter something that you're working on, right? I get good at that thing, and you get good at your thing too.
That's true. No, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know what it has to do with like the person who comes in and doesn't and just like Hulk smashes everybody and then neglects. Like I think I'm not. It's a hard thing to do, right? Like to kind of think about, put yourself out of your own particular situation and think for a second, like maybe I should work on a little defense, or maybe I should work on a little offense, right?
I think you should have a reason.
The reason is I want to be better at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but like the reason that I want to be better at jiu-jitsu is to roll with like Pete and Aubrey and these.
But you should be able to roll with anybody.
Yeah, like everybody who I roll with, like
no, anybody who walks in the door.
Yeah, those are the people. That's part of the group,
No, but it could be a new person. It's not part
of the
new
person. They'll come in and I'll roll with them too. Well, what I don't need to prepare for is people who are training in Arizona or Florida.
But there's a difference, right? There's a difference between me saying like, hey, I'm gonna just focus on, trying to counter something that I saw on some YouTube video, right? Or do something that really, whatever, just make anything up, right? I just want to work on something that isn't really helpful or whatever in the everyday course of jiu-jitsu. I don't know, in my gym.
You can do that, it's fine.
But I could also just say that I just want to get better at some facet of the game that I don't have a lot of time to work on in the ordinary course of affairs because of the fact that I'm such a beast. Or maybe I'm not a beast. Maybe I'm just a regular person and I'm so used to playing guard that I never really think about, like, okay, should I drill these other things that maybe I should drill some takedowns, right? Maybe I should just learn how to do some takedowns, even though I don't ever play any takedowns, right? I just sit. Every time we roll, I just sit and I play guard. That's what I do, because it's easy, because I can do it. Nobody can stop me from sitting down and playing guard.
Yeah.
Okay, but it might be good to kind of know or work on or, figure out.
Yeah, it would be.
Maybe I should learn some other things.
But why would I unless I plan?
Because I want to have complete knowledge.
What's that mean?
That means I want to be a complete grappler. I want to be able to be competent in all phases of a grappling match.
Okay, that's impossible, but okay.
It's not impossible.
Yeah, it is.
Competent. You can be competent. You don't have to be good.
In all phases?
All phases.
All phases.
Yeah, why not?
Every single possible
It's
orientation
possible.
of two
You know who
people.
it is? You know who's competent in all phases?
Marcelo, but
Yeah.
not all Marcelo.
I mean, there's a lot of other people who are competent in all phases of jiu-jitsu. Yes. Not awesome, not the best, but there are a couple people who are really good at every part of jiu-jitsu. Lucas Lepre, he's pretty much good at everything.
No,
JT Torres, pretty much good at everything.
You're implying that there's not more jiu-jitsu to learn.
No, I'm not saying they know everything. I'm just saying competent. I'm just saying good, like decent. I bet you there's no phase of jiu-jitsu that you could be like put Lucas Lepre in and he would not be really good at it.
Yeah.
Hodger, Marcelo, They are good in every position, right? They're good in every situation.
Uh-huh.
There's nothing you're going to stump in.
Yeah, all I'm saying is
that's all I'm saying. You're not going to get to the point where, like, even the meows. Like, if you said, like, if you could magically teleport a meow into this room right now. We said, let's do some stand-up with a meow bug.
Yeah.
I bet you he's pretty good at it.
I
bet you he's a lot better than we think.
If I had a time machine and we went 50 years into the future and saw what jiu-jitsu was like, I bet we could find something that meow would not be good at.
Never. They are good at everything, in all times, at all levels. Same thing with like King Cornelius, right? He's not known for takedowns, but I'll bet you if you brought him in here, he'd throw the hell out of you.
Yeah, but like,
I think he is a black belt.
You're also like naming people who like compete a lot.
Hey, just
like for me,
John doesn't compete. I'll go back to him. He doesn't compete, and he'll throw you on your ear for sure.
Like I was a person who always neglected takedowns because of my dislocation when I was trying to do it.
That's fine.
And so I didn't.
Yes.
Right? And then what happened? Coronavirus happened.
Yes.
Right? No training partners, nothing really.
All you have is dummies.
All I have is dummies.
You started doing that. You got the word, and you started working on your
Started doing the throwing. That is a great reason to start learning throws.
There you go.
Starting to learn throwing because you want to be a well-rounded grappler is just you like immersed in propaganda, and you have no actual like self-realization in mind.
What are you talking about?
Like, what are you saying when you want to be a well-rounded grappler? What does that mean?
I just said it. You should be competent in all phases of.
Yeah, and I'm saying like all the term "all phases of a jiu-jitsu match" like doesn't mean anything.
Sure it does.
No, because
I can fill it with right now.
There's
standing, passing.
Yeah. Okay. What's in between standing and passing?
The throw.
Okay. What's
or
in
the,
between?
Or the pull.
What's in between standing and the throw?
What is in between standing and the kazushi?
Okay. What's in between standing and kazushi?
What's in between gripping?
Okay, what's in between standing and gripping?
Gripping.
Okay, what's
in
between
space. I mean, you gotta close the distance.
Okay, what's in between standing and closing the distance? We can do this. We can keep going.
Yeah, but that's just that's like a logical fallacy. That's like Zeno's arrow.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I shoot, I can always divide the arrow, the distance between the arrow and the target, into infinity.
You're never gonna finish jiu-jitsu.
But you know what? If I shoot an arrow at a target.
Yeah.
It will hit the target.
Understanding jiu-jitsu is not shooting an arrow at a target.
It pretty much is.
No, because you have to do
it. It isn't just an exercise on paper that we can make up like kind of like fallacies.
No, what you're saying is that if I go into a match and submit a person, then by that definition, I obviously understand jiu-jitsu because I hit the target. I understand all of jiu-jitsu because I shot the arrow.
A couple aspects of jiu-jitsu, yes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't improve in other aspects.
Yeah, and I'm saying that you could never, ever have a complete.
I didn't say that. I said competent.
Competent, yeah, like competent.
I didn't say that you knew everything or that you're perfect at everything.
Our level of competence now is in the future going to be incompetence, right? Like that's the whole argument with like if you had a purple belt, could you go back and beat the Gracies?
No,
like
probably not.
Probably
not. But maybe you could. But who cares? What is the point of that?
The point is that you can't. The idea that you could be a well-rounded grappler is just an idea based on.
The definition of a well-rounded grappler may change, or the idea that whatever people knew 100 years ago, right, may or may not be successful today, right, or vice versa. Doesn't necessarily mean that everybody during that period was as competent as they could be given that time or understanding in that moment, right? I mean, it may be relative. You're right? Like a swimmer today, an Olympic swimmer today, if they went back 100 years, would just destroy everybody for a lot of different reasons, right? I mean, there's just technique. I mean, food, nutrition. Whatever it was, right? Training methods, technology, whatever, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the people who were swimming back then sucked. They were doing the best that they knew at the time. They were the best of the time. They were competent, probably more than competent if they're Olympic swimmers. They're the best. Yeah. By definition, they're the best of the best. All right? I mean, that doesn't necessarily invalidate what somebody's doing today or vice versa invalidate what they were doing back then. It's the same way with jiu-jitsu. I mean, all you have is your ability to say, well, what is my understanding of the game today? And then try to develop your understanding as fully as you can within the limitations that you operate within that you may or may not even be able to see at the moment.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive
to
whatever ideal you have in your head. And it doesn't mean like, well, 100 years from now, whatever I'm doing now may or may not be irrelevant. I'm going to be dead in 100 years. It has no meaning to me. All I care about is my own personal development in the moment that I have an opportunity to pursue that development.
Yeah, but the idea that you could ever...
I'm not trying to compete with somebody 500 years ago.
Yeah,
I'm not saying like, oh, I'm going to go back and grapple with some famous grappler 500 years, or grapple with Kimura or Mitsuya Maeda or Howard Kick. You know, Shozo used to say that, you know, he would love to be able to go back in time and like throw Jigoro Kano and show him what's up, right? Well, okay, yeah, it's nice to fantasize about that stuff, but whatever you're doing today, however you picture yourself attaining whatever level of understanding that you think you can understand or accomplish, has nothing to do with what happens 100 years ahead or behind when you actually exist. You can still become a more complete, more competent grappler.
Yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
You can become a more complete, more competent grappler.
There you go. As competent in all phases.
You can be... Yeah.
All right, if you guys disagree with me in the comments, you go for
more
it.
competent than you were yesterday, but never competent.
Never what?
Never just like the idea of like the existence of a point where you're competent at jiu-jitsu. Like I know this, and this. Like I have a black belt. I know jiu-jitsu, right? I've studied the ways of jiu-jitsu, and I know I'm well-rounded, right? If you put me in any position, I can grapple my way out of it, right? It's just like, okay.
I mean, nobody actually does that, I don't think. But
it's just.
I don't understand what your point is. Like, aren't we all essentially trying to get better at jiu-jitsu? Isn't that what we're doing here?
Yeah, but not with like an end goal of well-roundedness in mind, right? Like I want to be.
Isn't that what it is?
No,
what is the end goal? Is there an end goal? Does there have to be an end goal?
I
don't know that was an end goal.
I want to do.
I think you're making it an end goal when it doesn't need to be.
Like what?
It's a process. Maybe it's an unending process. You're never going to be the most competent.
Jiu-jitsu isn't a shape. Like it can't be well-rounded anyway. Like.
Yeah, but now you're just playing semantics.
Yeah, we are playing semantics. But
I understand. Like,
so when you mean well-rounded, like
you're competent in all phases of grappling. I don't know how much clearer I can be.
Like
that's a very unambiguous.
In the positions, in the transitions, in
yes. All phases. All phases. All. More
there are an infinite number of possible combinations of two people.
Yeah.
When
I'm not saying that you achieve jiu-jitsu enlightenment and you become like you're in the matrix and you can do whatever you want whenever you want. That's not what I'm saying. That's not. I don't think what my words even imply.
Okay.
Becoming more competent, as competent as you possibly can be, which may not be. It may be far short of the possible. All things of jiu-jitsu, right? No, just becoming more competent. So, if, for example, if all I ever do is play guard and I never do anything standing, there's a lot I can improve. Just understanding what is a throw? How do I do a throw? Maybe trying to drill some throws. I'm becoming more competent in that phase of a grappling match. That's it.
For some reason, that seems like it's less well-rounded. Well, because you have like your core game here, and then now you've got this weird stick of throwing out here that sticks out from the rest of your game.
Well, you're the one who's being spatial now. I'm not trying to draw pictures of this stuff. All right, I got to go home. It's late. Thanks, guys. See you tomorrow when we'll regale you with more of our silly debates. And maybe not so silly. I don't know. All right. Well, let's do my outro.
I need to get my ideas in order.
Famous words right there. You should put that on.